Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the Luke Dawkins01 YouTube channel. It is no secret that over the course of the last couple decades, superhero movies have taken off. They are everywhere. There's so many different iterations, so many different storylines, so many different companies getting into the explosion that is the superhero freakout. Obviously, if you were to go pound for pound, who has been the most successful in the mainstream integration of superheroes and everything belonging, the MCU would clearly be head and shoulders above the rest of the competition. The question then becomes, if the MCU is head and shoulders above the rest, then what makes the perfect MCU movie? What movie can we point to as the greatest of the greatest MCU movie? What separates the good ones from the great ones, right? What's the difference between up here and down here when it comes to the most successful superhero movie franchise of all time? Today, we're going to be breaking down what makes the perfect MCU movie. I have broken down the MCU movie into 10 different components. For each of these components, not only will I identify them, but I will also tell you which movie did the best when it comes to that particular component. At the end, we will combine all of these components to see if we were to take all of the MCU movies together, create the greatest amalgamation of them, what would the greatest MCU movie of all time look like? First up on our list, and it's honestly probably one of the most important things when it comes to a well-crafted superhero movie in general, but also basically to the straight up satisfaction of the original fan base. Many superhero movies, at least the really, really good ones, have a comic book counterpart where they draw the inspiration from the characters to the very storylines themselves. So when you are crafting a superhero movie, much like the MCU, you need comic accuracy. Comic accuracy should always be the first thought when a director stumbles across the opportunity to direct a superhero movie. Now, there are a couple MCU storylines that do this very well. There are a couple MCU storylines that literally abandon everything in totality. I will say, when it comes to comic accuracy, there does need to be some amount of liberties taken with it. More so talking directly about the look of the characters or the comic book suits. Now, unfortunately, there's just the straight up fact that some things are going to look better on paper, and if you move them to a live action counterpart, they may start to look a little silly. My best comparison for this is going to be the Halloween episode of WandaVision, where we saw arguably the most comic accurate designs we ever have for Scarlet Witch and for Vision, as well as some of the other characters in there like Quicksilver, Wiccan, guys like that very much showed a comic accurate look. So there does need to be certain liberties taken into that when it comes to something like character design. But if we were to really nail it down, which MCU movie did the best when it comes to comic accuracy? And truthfully for me, it is a relatively simple answer. I believe that Captain America: The First Avenger did the best, by far, with comic accuracy. The reason I say that is because it shows why Steve Rogers became Captain America. It shows the decision, the thought process behind making him the world's first super soldier, and all the perks and all the fame and all the glory that comes along with that. After that, we then see him get turned into basically an agent of propaganda. He was touted around, put in front of soldiers. He was just basically a picture boy, an Uncle Sam, so to speak, for the war, only for him to finally utilize his capabilities, his talents, his powers for the greater good, for justice, and we watched him become the Captain America we have all known and love. And of course, this movie also involves a very comic accurate Halloween-y costume looking Captain America when he was the agent of propaganda, only to then give us one of the coolest MCU suits, I think, to date. Honestly, they started off out of the gate swinging with that Captain America design. I mean, dude, chef's kiss. There's very few designs in the MCU itself that I like as much as that first Captain America design. But, like I said, to round off our first component of the perfect MCU movie, I give comic accuracy to Captain America: The First Avenger. The second component that I have for the perfect MCU movie comes from something that the MCU may or may not have cornered the market on, so to speak, or at least created their very own brand of it. And truthfully, this can be a point of argument, a point of contest from those who maybe don't like the MCU, and that is going to be the humor. Now, some movies do a very good job of balancing humor and seriousness. Other movies, Thor: Love and Thunder, do a very, very bad job of just jumping straight into the silliness and the humor, where it doesn't feel like you're even watching a superhero movie anymore. It feels like you're watching a D-grade comedy show, right? It just becomes bad. It's oversaturated with too much humor. I feel if the MCU does find, and when they do find that perfect balance of humor and seriousness, you have a good movie on your hands. Truthfully, even though sometimes perhaps it feels like they jump a little bit too far into the silliness, I think Guardians of the Galaxy as a trilogy did a really good job with that. That is not, however, my final answer. My final answer is not the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. My final answer for the perfect blend of humor and seriousness in an MCU movie is going to be Iron Man 1. The thing about Iron Man is it doesn't really stick out when you begin to think about the humor, but if you rewatch that movie, there are a couple times in that movie where you find yourself laughing, whether it's just due to the personality of Tony Stark himself and how he basically holds himself at that stage in his life, and we get to see him obviously take on more and more responsibility and the weight of his actions as the CEO of a weapons company, everything that follows that. There's a lot of really good laughing parts of that movie, but the whole time there is a serious undertone in which you are following a lot along the plot perfectly while also interjecting some good laughing moments here and there. So my answer for perfect blend of MCU humor is going to be Iron Man 1. For the third overall component of a perfect MCU movie, I have the soundtrack. The soundtrack can honestly represent perfectly what that movie even stands for. A good soundtrack will perfectly match the tone and sometimes even the direction of the movie itself. Song choice is very, very particular, right? Or at least it should be. Each song should have a reason for being there and match the overall feeling that you get when you watch that movie. A well-placed song will not take you out of the movie, but rather it'll push you deeper into what is going on. And obviously there's things like scores and things like that where you have like a Christian Bale Batman who just has an absolute beautiful score behind it. I'm not talking about scores, I'm talking so much more about the soundtrack itself, the song selection. And to me, there is one that's just up there. There's a couple that are around here, but there is one MCU movie that just sits atop as the king of soundtracks, and that is going to be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. Obviously, the opening scene of this movie is a young Peter Quill being abducted by the Ravagers, and it makes sense that basically the entire soundtrack we hear the entire time is from Peter's Walkman. It's the decade, the era in which he was abducted, so it makes sense that as we are listening to this movie, we're just listening to what Peter likes to listen to. It's so well done, even to that very last song itself, as the movie begins to fade to black, and as we begin to look forward to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I honestly can't think of a better soundtrack. It matched the tone of the movie perfectly. It made sense for every song to be in there. And that is my selection for best soundtrack in the MCU. And obviously a good movie, any good movie, not just superhero movies in general, need to have an amazing lead role played by a dynamic actor or actress. I think in superhero movies in general, there have been a lot of really good knock it out of the park performances by main characters as well as maybe even some side characters, right? There have been people who have pretty much brought to life what we wanted to see out of that superhero on the big screen. I think of people like Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, sometimes Chris Hemsworth Thor, Chris Evans as Captain America, Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. There's been a lot of really good ones. I mean, even someone like Ryan Reynolds, who seems to have cornered the market on what a Deadpool personality looks like. There's been a lot of really good representations. There have been many poor representations as well. Maybe some feelings about the actor or actress itself that perhaps even influenced our liking of their portrayal of that character. But needless to say, there are a lot of pros and cons when it comes to the people that are the leading role of superhero movies. So Since we're crafting the perfect MCU movie, we need the perfect. Knocked it out of the park. No question. This is the best representation we will ever see of this character, especially in a live stream format. And for me, if you're an MCU fan, it's probably no other than Tony Stark himself, Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. You want to talk about a character who embodied, felt like it was ripped from the comic book himself. Felt like they just put Robert Downey Jr. in front of a camera, gave him a comic book, and said, I want you to become this person, and he did it. Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark will probably go down as a top 2, maybe top 1 of all time. The only other one in contention, maybe Heath Ledger Joker, Hugh Jackman Wolverine, kind of guys like that, but easily Tony Stark, RDJ, amazing. I feel like there's no controversy in that. I feel like he easily knocked that role out of the park, and because of that, if we're talking best MCU portrayal, congratulations, RDJ, you have made the list. So we've talked about a lot of things so far. Now we're going to jump into the movie itself, and what I mean by that is the plot. Obviously, the plot is basically the movie itself. It is the thing that you are watching. It's the thing that's drawing you in. A perfect plot has you glued to your seat from the moment it opens to the very moment that the credits roll across the screen. The plot is essential. You will not sit through a movie that the plot does not have you drawn in. You will not sit through a movie that you can't believe what's going on. You will sit in a movie that captivates you from the moment that screen lights up. So then, essentially, the issue becomes, with a franchise as rich as the MCU, what is the best plot? For these purposes, I have pretty much relegated. We're only talking about solo superhero movies. Obviously, with things like Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War, it's a little bit unfair to kind of put those against some of the other ones, because those are literally the culmination of almost 20 years of storytelling. So which one as a standalone film just absolutely blew our socks off in terms of plot itself? What was something that once we walked out of the movie, we were like, I'm going to need a couple of days to think about what I just saw, because that blew me away. To me, when it comes to a single hero title film, even though there are a couple of other characters tossed into this movie, to be fair, I think Captain America Winter Soldier. I mean, that's close to a 10 out of 10 movie as you can get for a superhero movie, right? It's so good. I mean, obviously, if you followed along the Marvel Universe from the comics itself, the reveal of the Winter Soldier as Bucky probably wasn't as shocking, but for a casual Marvel fan, I'm sure that when you guys saw him take off that little mask that he had right here, and you kind of slowly piece together, why does he look so familiar? Wait, that's his friend from the first movie. Wait, he's supposed to be dead. I'm sure that was a Luke, I am your father level plot twist for some of you guys, right? I mean, the infiltration of S.H.I.E.L.D. by Hydra the entire time, Captain America becoming a fugitive in the country that he wears the stripes of. I mean, talk about plots. That was absolutely amazing, and if we're doing a perfect MCU movie, we need a Captain America Winter Soldier level plot. So since we have talked about plot, I feel like the next jumping off point is going to be the peak moment. I'm not necessarily talking about the climax of the movie, but more so one instance in the movie where it leaves you going, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm talking about the moment in a movie that when you and your friends get out of the movie theater and you jump into the car, you guys go, did you guys see what just happened? How cool was that? And then you spend the next 5 minutes with your friends screaming in the car about how you feel like no movie will ever have that level of absolute peakness ever again. And there are a couple moments in the MCU that feel like that, right? And I know I said earlier that for the purpose of plot, I was excluding team-up level movies. I'm going to bring it back in for this one. And maybe that's me breaking the rules, but you know what? To me, there's one singular moment that when I was watching it in the theater, when it happened, I'm sitting with my friends, the entire movie theater lit up We were screaming. Things were flying in the air. I was grabbing my friend's shirt, shaking him violently. It was one of the most euphoric experiences I've ever had in a movie theater in my life. Honestly, it makes me a little sad when I think about where the current state of the MCU is and whether or not I'll ever feel a moment of, holy crap, this is the coolest thing of all time ever again. There's two that are close. I'll tell you what my number two was. My number two was seeing Tobey and Andrew again in Spider-Man and Spider-Man Far From Home. That was two. That's two. But to me, the moment that made me scream and lose my mind was when Thanos is beating down on Thor. And then it cuts. And you see that hammer moving just a little. You see it start to go up and you're going, is Thor calling the hammer? And then you see the hammer fly across the screen and it smacks Thanos in his face. And you go, oh, he called the hammer. But then it starts going backwards and you're going, wait, someone else has the hammer. And then it goes, phew. And Captain America looks at the screen. He stares down Thanos and you say, Steve just picked up the hammer. Steve has Mjolnir. Dude, oh my God, the goosebumps that traveled throughout that movie theater, I felt like could be felt for miles. That was opening night of Avengers Endgame also. So all of my fellow nerds, let's hear it for that community, were out there and we were all losing our minds collectively. In that moment, we were a hive mind of pure nerdosity, right? Easily, best peak moment in the MCU is seeing Steve Rogers pick up Mjolnir. God. It's so good. Every good movie in general has the moment toward the end of the film where everything is falling in place. This is the big final battle, the ultimate contest of good versus evil, bad versus justice. The final fight can honestly sometimes make or break a movie, right? I mean, I'm thinking of that final Batman movie where he's fighting Bane, and there's so much controversy about that fight scene because so many people feel like it's a dance. And I feel like, honestly, if you're able to look past that, fine, that's cool. But for a lot of people, honestly, I've heard that kind of ruined the movie for them. Was the what some might say like a ballerina-like final dance, right? You need a good, brutal, heavy fight to end off that movie. It's the climax where everything comes together in the movie, right? And honestly, when I think about best fights in the MCU, things like perhaps Captain America Winter Soldier, where Steve and Bucky are fighting on the highway, that might be probably one of the best fight scenes in the MCU. Definitely one of the best choreographed. You can put things like Shang-Chi, some of Black Panther's fight scenes up there as well. But in terms of this is the final fight of the movie, this is the culmination of everything this movie has been going forward towards. This is the fight we've been waiting for. There's one really, really good one. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, because if anything, this makes the scene all the more beautiful. It's not necessarily a fight of good versus evil. It's a fight that's breaking apart unity, if anything. It's a fight that's tearing apart friendship. And the way that I'm talking about it right now, you might have guessed already, it is going to be the final fight from Captain America Civil War. Dude, Tony just realized that Bucky was the one who killed his parents. Tony then realized that Steve knew the whole time. Steve is defending Bucky, his friend that he literally just got back. His friend who he was finally able to snap out of it. He finally got his old friend back, and he's trying to talk everything down, but Tony's not having it. Tony says, "You chose him over me." Put up them fists. And it's just, oh my God, the weight of that fight where each punch felt like a betrayal. Each punch felt like a stab in the back. It didn't matter if you were Captain America, Team Iron Man. It didn't matter. You were watching that fight going, it's kind of intense. And then obviously for Bucky to have his arm get shot off, for Captain America to defeat Tony despite his technological advancements, for him to leave the shield behind after Tony saying, "You don't deserve that shield. My father made that shield." God, dude. just the gravity of that final fight. If you're going to have a perfect MCU movie, you need that type of fight in there. Like, that's non-negotiable. Component number 8 for the perfect MCU movie is going to be the plot twist. Plot twists have long been a device used for movies for a very, very long time, where it just leaves you, like, literally gasped. It takes all the breath out of you, right? Obviously, people like M. Night Shyamalan, who, dear Lord, feels like invented the plot twist itself sometimes. Movies like the Sixth Sense, where you go, Bruce was a ghost the whole time. What the heck? Like, Luke, I am your father, which I said earlier. Plot twists are sometimes insane. Sometimes even those are the peak of the movie. What I was talking about earlier. The MCU has had a couple really cool plot twists thrown in there, right? I was talking about earlier about Bucky's reveal, or Winter Soldier's reveal to be Bucky. How, like I said, for a lot of people, that was a crazy plot twist. It felt very out of nowhere, right? It felt like it's literally the connection of a storyline that you had long forgotten about for some people, right? All the way watching Captain America First Avenger to where we are now in Captain America Winter Soldier. But I mean, come on. There's one plot twist that stands just head and shoulders above every other plot twist in the MCU. And again, for some people, if you are a Marvel faithful and you read this way back in the day in the comics, you probably saw this coming, but that also probably didn't mean it didn't hurt any less when Thanos snapped. I mean, if we're being real, even for those of us who knew what was coming, there was a little bit of doubts in our head, right? It's like, are they actually going to bring this monumental moment onto the screen where literally half of existence is wiped out? And you see the snap. You see the dusting. You see the
Stark? I don't feel so good.
Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. You see that happen, and even though you kind of expected it, you're still like, oh, crap, right? I remember, again, I'm there opening day. When that happened, there wasn't a sound in my movie theater. Every seat was full. But the collective lack of noise and lack of breath from everyone in that audience, we were just captivated by almost sheer horror. If you're talking plot twists, the snap is unmatched. So our second to last component for the perfect MCU movie, earlier we established the perfect protagonist, the perfect main character. Now let's establish the opposite. Let's establish the perfect antagonist. Let's set up the person who drives the hero to greater lengths, perhaps even to lower depths, where they begin to really fight what it means to be a hero and every bit of responsibility and suffering that comes along with that. The MCU has had no shortage of great villains. I'm thinking Killmonger, Green Goblin. Even though he wasn't there for very long, he did so well. Loki, right? There's been some really good ones. There have been some lackluster ones. I haven't watched this movie, but somehow I still don't know who the main villain from the Marvels was, right? There's been some really good ones, and then there's been some absolutely forgettable ones, right? Guys, who's the best villain in the MCU? If I ask you that question and your answer is not either Killmonger, Loki, or Thanos, I'm kind of like, where are we going here with things, right? King the Conqueror, I mean, I guess you could say he did a pretty good job while he was in there, but he's not there anymore, right? And who knows, maybe my answer to this could change after we see RDJ come back as Doom. Maybe he just absolutely demolishes that role as well, just like he did Iron Man. But come on. Best villain in the MCU? It's inevitable. It's Thanos. It's the dude that pushed the Avengers to the breaking point. It's the guy that wiped out half of the universe. Overall impact as a villain? No one's done a better job of Thanos. Josh Brolin's portrayal of him has put him in the upper echelon of not just superhero villains, but cinematic villains. He's up there with Darth Vader. He's up there with Heath Ledger's Joker. Thanos is a top 10 villain ever. He's amazing. And what makes him even more just insane is the fact that there's a heavy bit of people out there who are kind of like, I see his point. Like, I see the logic behind it. There's some people who are even like, Thanos did nothing wrong. I mean, that's a little psychotic, but I see what you're saying. He's such a great villain that he caused you to even be like, he kind of has a point. If you're going to have the perfect MCU movie, you need the perfect antagonist, and that is the Mad Titan himself, Thanos. And our final component for the perfect MCU movie is going to be, strangely enough and fitting enough, the end credit scene. The MCU has become a staple when it comes to staying in your seats when the movie is over. At this point, if you don't know to stay in your seats once the credits start rolling, where have you been for the last 20 years, right? Like, what's going on? Anytime I'm in a Marvel movie and people stand up and leave once that title card comes on at the end of the movie, I'm almost sitting there like, peasants, what are you doing? Sit down. The movie is not over. There's a 5-second clip coming that I'm willing to sit through 5 or 10 minutes of end credits for, right? What is it that is going to drive us to stay in our seats, right? What is the moment where we just sat through 10, 15 minutes of end credits and this pops up and it just leaves you absolutely floored? I think, first of all, the most disappointed I've ever been in an end credit scene is a Captain America PE teacher thing.
Hi, I'm Captain America. Here to talk to you about one of the most valuable traits a soldier or student can have. Patience.
I think that's the most mad I've been in an MCU movie. I was like, I kind of appreciate the joke, but at the same time, I just watched every single person who was involved in this movie in any capacity, credit to them, make it faster, right? Give me something more, right? So imagine this. Imagine you just watched the perfect MCU movie. There's nothing about it you would change. The plot, the soundtrack, the protagonist, the antagonist, the peak moment that you can't wait to talk with your friends about, right? Every single thing that we've talked about so far is just so extremely perfect, but it's an MCU movie, so you know I have to stay afterwards. I have to put my butt in this seat, and I have to wait for whatever peak is about to happen after this. The greatest end credit of all time. Oddly enough, because people didn't really, people liked it, but it's a little polarizing. Spider-Man Far From Home had the best end credit scene I've ever seen, because it literally continued. It was basically as if you just ripped the final scene and put it there. It was basically the continuation of that movie rather than setting something else up. They ripped one of the heaviest and most important parts of that movie and put it as an end credit scene. When Mysterio revealed Peter Parker to be Spider-Man.
Spider-Man's real name is... Spider-Man's name is Peter Parker.
My jaw dropped. I was just thinking in my head, what does this mean for the future? Peter Parker is now revealed to be Spider-Man. What does that mean for his identity? What does that mean for his everyday life, right? It sets up so many ideas that we had to tackle in our mind in a 3-second span before those lights turned off again, right? Easily the greatest end scene credit of all time. Like, golly, can you guys think of a better one? That one had me floored. Those are the 10 components that I believe if you put all of these together, especially if they're ripped from those movies at the absolute perfect levels that they are, and made a one single MCU movie combining all of these, perfect MCU movie. 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10, 12 out of 10, right? Cannot be passed, will never be passed, right? Let me know what you guys think about these components. Let me know if there's anything that you guys think I missed or left out. Or let me know if there's some moments that you would actually prefer over some of these selections that I chose. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.